she get mad. And one time we were in the mall, and we were discussing about something, and she got so mad she even like trying to punch me in the.
Sumit dropped a truth bomb so big, even the therapist stopped breathing for a second. Out of nowhere, sitting right there in front of everyone, he revealed he'd put $50,000, their money, into an investment, and Jenny found out with the rest of us. The expression on her face went from confusion to pure, silent disbelief. Right before it cracked open into anger, she could barely hold back. The moment was so charged, even the background chatter in the room seemed to vanish. You know that feeling when you look over at your partner and realize you don't know them like you thought? Jenny's face said all of it at once. There's a kind of silence in a marriage that screams louder than any argument, and you could feel that rippling between them. This wasn't some small splurge. It was their joint life savings gone in a snap, without a single warning. The backdrop made it so much worse. Here they were, not huddled in safe privacy, but surrounded by a therapist, fellow cast members, and an invisible wall of cameras, every reaction about to be judged from all sides. Culturally, money isn't just cash, it's trust. For a couple who'd built their entire story on crossing continents, standing up to parents, fighting for love against the odds, this was the kind of betrayal you almost never come back from. Jenny's shock wasn't only about dollars and cents, it was public humiliation, a deep slice through her belief that they were a team. Sumit didn't look shameful or even anxious. He seemed almost matter-of-fact, like he expected her to understand without needing to ask. But instead of acceptance, he was hit by a wall of Jenny's disbelief. And the more she realized how big this was, the huge sum, the sneaking around, the absolute absence of conversation, the angrier she got. It wasn't just about being left out, it was about being blindsided in a way that shattered the very idea of what a partnership is meant to be. In that moment, every happy memory probably felt tainted. How do you stay married to someone who can erase your opinion on something this massive? People in the room tried not to stare, but every sideways glance said it all. That's a couple in trouble. Even before the fireworks started, you could feel the tension ratcheting up. Everyone's wondering whether Jenny would explode or walk out. For a woman who's moved her entire life to another country, given up everything familiar, almost begging for respect from Sumit's family and the world at large, this hit different. Emotional stakes don't get higher than the feeling you never truly knew who you trusted most. There's hurt, there's anger, and swirling around that, there's fear. Fear she's not just lost money, but the story she thought she was living. Nobody could miss the way lines were drawn across the room the moment that news came out. Eyes flicked to Jenny, searching to see if she'd shatter or become steel, and to Sumit, wondering what would push a person to gamble not only with funds but with the future of a relationship already on thin ice. The worst part was, as Jenny's mind raced through every shared memory, you could see her replaying every earlier moment, searching for signs she missed. Had she known this side of him all along and ignored it out of hope? Or was this just a desperate act from a man cornered by family, career, and bills they never seemed able to pay off? As the stunned silence lingered, a new, sharper question buzzed in the air, not only about where their money had vanished, but about what other secrets might be hiding in plain sight. Maybe this bombshell wasn't the beginning of their breakup, but the result of years of unresolved tension nobody wanted to name out loud. If trust is the currency of any marriage, then this moment broke the bank. Was it betrayal or an act of last-ditch survival? And if this is what Sumit could do once, what else had Jenny never been told? Before all this exploded, you could already feel the pressure cooker. Jenny and Sumit had spent weeks locked in a cycle of awkward meals and late-night whispers at his parents' house, surrounded by relatives who always looked like they were calculating whether this marriage was a passing phase or a lifetime mistake. Every morning felt like another round of walking on eggshells. It was never just about space. A grown woman in her 60s forced to tiptoe around someone else's living room can only take so much. Their kitchen conversations, clipped and breathless, made it clear they weren't just running out of patience, but running out of hope for privacy or basic comfort. Add in a few sly digs from Sumit's parents, and you've got a daily, low-boil stress neither wanted to admit. Money was an open wound. Jenny tried to save face, but everyone watching could see bills mounting, resentment simmering, and Sumit always skating the thin ice between being playful and dismissive. Their arguments kept looping around the same issues. Can we move out? Can we even afford to? Whose fault is it our lives feel like borrowed time? Every tense look hinted at all the silent accusations neither wanted to say out loud. It was as if both had started keeping mental lists of sacrifices made and slights absorbed. The once innocent jokes about dollars stretched further and began to sound like little jabs, each one going deeper. Then, out in the open, with the secret money move finally revealed, Sumit tried to explain. His voice was steady, almost defensive. He claimed he hadn't hidden the investment out of malice. He was trying to secure their future. He wanted to catch an opportunity that his friend had shared, quick enough not to miss out, like this was his way of rescuing them from slogging through paycheck-to-paycheck living. For a split second, some part of you wondered if maybe, in his head, he believed this. Maybe he did think a bold move would finally impress Jenny or quiet his parents. But when the big decisions come with big risks, it never matters what the intention was, only who's left holding the consequences. Jenny's response wasn't gentle or measured. It was fire and ice, all at once. Her voice cracked, not out of weakness, but rage. If you listened closely, you could hear the sound of respect breaking into pieces. This wasn't the dramatic TV slap. It was something deeper, her shouting about lies in public, in front of people who'd secretly sided against her from day one. She accused Sumit of treating her like a stranger instead of a wife, shaming him for calling this helping the family when he'd pushed her further into isolation and stress. The crowd tensed. Some looked away, afraid to watch. Others leaned in, secretly hungry for the next round. That's when things took an ugly turn. Rumors started swirling. There were whispers about Jenny threatening violence in public, a punch thrown or nearly thrown, lines blurred by decades of reality TV that's taught us to expect the worst. But here's the uncomfortable pause. Even after all those accusations, can anyone say for certain what really went on behind the glare of those cameras? A flash of anger, a raised voice, a dramatic gesture. When does it become abuse? And when is it an outburst from a person pushed past her breaking point? The show's edit never gives us the true, raw context. Jenny insisted it was a joke, nothing more, while Sumit's side painted her as explosive, dangerous even. Somewhere between those stories sits the truth nobody wants to admit. With the money betrayal on the table, the old grudges clawed their way back. Sumit's secret drinking, the way he brushed off her concerns until it was hours too late, the growing list of things he chose to hide. Jenny snapped, demanding to know how long he thought he could live, as if she was invisible, as if her sacrifices for his family never counted. Sumit, now cornered, started talking about how Jenny acts controlling, always wanting her way. But was it about control, or was it about the desperation of someone who's given up everything, down to her last coin, and now has to beg for information like a guest in her own life? Every accusation was met with a new counterattack. Jenny's age became the new shield and the new weapon, blamed for her anger, used to dismiss her complaints. There were cracks about her acting like his mother, as if a woman in her 60s shouldn't dare ask for autonomy. Questions about their future felt suddenly insurmountable. When your spouse erases you from decisions about where you'll live and whether you'd even be able to pay medical bills, it's more than a power play. It's existential. No one talked directly about the looming specter of Jenny's declining health, but the urgency was clear. Underneath every fight, every tear, was the growing fear that the clock might run out before they could start living anything close to a normal marriage. Yet for all the shouting matches and accusations, the lines between villain and victim blurred with every new secret that tumbled out. If you listened closely, you could hear the sound of lives tangling, not just splitting. Jenny was not just angry. There was raw pain in her voice, disappointment from years of waiting for something better. Sumit looked hunted, ashamed yet defiant, insisting he only ever wanted to pull them up from ruin. But in doing so, did he sink them further? Or was this marriage already off balance, with both trapped, too scared of what leaving would look like? Viewers rushed to Twitter to declare sides, some calling Jenny unstable, others raging against Sumit for gaslighting and financial control. Everyone watching wondered if this was the moment that would finally unravel everything, or if, in the heat of battle, another bottled-up secret would crack the fragile peace they were both pretending held them together. Yet, as the therapy session loomed, everyone could feel another bomb about to go off. People started to ask questions that wouldn't be answered tonight. Was this really about money, or about years of love curdling into resentment? Was anyone ready to hear the truth about Jenny's health, the ALS diagnosis lurking in the background? Or would the next session be the moment where all the real pain, not the TV drama, finally came into focus? Keep watching, because sometimes the real twist is hiding underneath the blow-ups, in the places these two are most desperate to keep quiet. There's a certain charge in the air when a camera crew follows you into therapy, and the room where Jenny and Sumit sat down looked more like a pressure cooker than a safe space. The therapist tried to keep her tone gentle, like sympathy might hold this marriage together where logic had failed. On one side, Jenny was sitting stiff, hands clenched and shoulders drawn up like she was bracing for a blow. Her eyes flicked everywhere except at Sumit, as if making direct eye contact would spark another explosion. Sumit sat half-sunk into the couch, his voice low, jaw set, but every second he avoided Jen's gaze looked like another silent admission. You didn't need subtitles to read the tension. Even the viewers felt on edge, waiting for someone to speak the truth out loud. The therapist began simple, asking why they were here. People watching at home muttered the answer before Jenny did, her voice landing somewhere between exhausted and angry. We're living with his parents, but that's not all. She sounded like someone who knew the pain wasn't just where everyone could see it. The real hairline cracks ran underneath, out of sight most days, but now, here for everyone to witness. Jenny didn't list all her resentments, no need. Sumit's eyes darted, already chest-tight. She mentioned the feeling of being trapped, not just in a house, but in a place where every part of her life, from the bedroom to the bank account, could be taken away without warning. The therapist nodded, but it was clear she'd heard something broken that went beyond the words. Sumit tried to explain himself. It wasn't that he wanted to hurt Jenny, he claimed, but that he felt powerless, trapped between her expectations and his parents' constant judgment. He called the 50,000 move an opportunity. He even hinted that if he'd waited for permission, the chance would pass by, that he risked missing out on the only door that might lead them out of financial dependency and back under their own roof. But his logic sat like a stone in the room. Jenny was shaking her head before he even finished, the word, excuse, practically hanging in the air. Every viewer could see what she was thinking. What's the point of love if you solve panic by gambling with someone else's trust? The therapist tried to turn the question around, gently but relentlessly. She asked both whether their anger was truly about the money, or if they were mourning something deeper. Jenny opened her mouth, then faltered for a second, trying to steady herself. You could hear the trembling edge in her answer. It wasn't the cash, not really. It was the loss of security, of believing her voice mattered at all. The lines in her face weren't new, but now the sadness looked heavier. Was it fear of growing old alone on foreign soil, or fear that she was beginning to disappear in her own marriage? Anger, here, was only the tip of something darker and much more desperate. Sumit jumped in before she could finish, casting himself as scared too, scared of her reactions, scared of never pleasing anyone on either side of the world. She gets mad, he offered, like that settled everything. Now the air got tighter. The show had already played the flashback to Jenny nearly lashing out in the mall, but in this room, things looked less simple. Jenny didn't deny her temper but bit back. I pretend I don't mean to scare. She sounded half defeated, half challenging. Social media was already dissecting the moment. Threads spun out debating whether Sumit was exaggerating her anger out of fear, spinning a story for sympathy, or whether Jenny's volatility was the red flag driving him underground with secrets. Online, battle lines formed quickly. Some fans raged about Sumit's betrayal, calling it classic financial abuse and demanding Jenny run for the hills. Others, wary of Jenny's past meltdowns, wondered how long Sumit had been enduring emotional crossfire and microaggressions himself. A few cynical voices joked that the only stable thing about their relationship was drama, but most weighed in heavy with emotion. Jenny herself, seeing the tidal wave headed her way, posted a statement insisting she had never physically attacked Sumit. "I was frustrated, not violent," she explained, her words sharp, but tinged with the sadness of someone tired of defending the same thing over and over again. In comments and reactions, armchair therapists tried to diagnose, but nobody could know what went on behind their closed doors. Back in the therapy room, the therapist pressed for specifics. What would it take for either of them to feel safe again? Jenny's reply was like a window cracked open. "I get angry because I'm locked out of everything. I don't control anything, not my money, not my home, not my body." That last admission lingered in the air, quiet and cutting. Suddenly the fights, the accusations, the moments of rage made sense as survival strategies in a life that felt like quicksand. For a woman whose age and illness were being weaponized against her, anger had become armor. The therapist nodded, eyes kind but worried. Was Sumit scared of her, or of being controlled, or of looking weak to his family for choosing a non-traditional marriage? In their culture, saving face isn't small. Every fight comes loaded with the ghosts of generations past. Things got even messier when the conversation slid into the question everyone skirts on reality TV. What if you're both right and both wrong? Jenny's fears of abandonment, Sumit's shame about failing as a provider, the unspoken terror of her health quietly declining. Nobody spoke the word else yet, but the shadow was unmistakable. Was Jenny more sensitive, quicker to anger, losing control of her emotions not simply from stress, but from an illness nobody had diagnosed? It left viewers whispering, "Are we seeing the fallout of something much crueler than marital drama?" As the hour wound on, the therapist brought them back to the fight's core. Was there anything left to fight for? Tears ran down Jenny's face, but she didn't shrink away. She said she wanted to try, wanted Sumit to try. Across from her, even behind the embarrassment and stonewalling, Sumit admitted he didn't see life without Jenny. In that raw, clumsy confession, the room softened, just for a heartbeat. But trust doesn't rebuild on words alone. The therapist ended with a question they both couldn't answer. Are you staying out of love or fear? Viewers were left staring, wondering if next week would bring another high-speed collision or a genuine moment of healing. But as Jenny and Sumit shuffled out, eyes swollen, whispers growing online, one thing was clear: some secrets were still left unsaid. The night wasn't over, and neither was the unraveling. What would surface next time, and could this marriage survive another storm? Stay with it. The wildest revelation is still waiting in the wings. Reality TV loves a villain, but whose truth matters when the emotions are this raw? Jenny's supposed attack in the mall became instant fuel for every critic and defender online. There were people replaying the story in their minds, picturing fists flying, while others saw nothing more than frustration boiling over in a tense moment. Sumit repeated his side often, the detail growing each time, a near punch, a crowd staring, everyone frozen. He didn't say he was afraid for his safety, but let the image of danger hang in the air unspoken. Jenny pushed back, eyes stinging with hurt and disbelief, saying she'd never do that, not in the way everyone imagined. Her pretend jab, in her mind, was a last attempt at humor when words failed. But intent and perception rarely align in a tangled relationship. The most painful battles in a marriage rarely happen in public. They happen in the silent rooms after, where accusations echo against the walls. At home, every argument gets replayed, scars picked open, each side remembering only the parts that hurt the most. The camera crew only ever sees one frame. Online, a single outburst is evidence, replayed endlessly as proof. In private, Jenny wonders if her feelings matter at all, if defending herself is useless, because people have already picked a side. In public, Sumit enjoys more of the benefit of the doubt, quiet, controlled, always framing himself as the peacekeeper who never fights unless pushed too far. It's easy to call Jenny unstable or angry when anger is all the audience is shown. But is anger ever only about the moment? Jenny's loneliness was eating away at her before their first argument aired. Imagine moving continents, living surrounded by in-laws who think your marriage is a mistake, feeling not just like an outsider, but like an unwelcome guest in the home you paid for. Every time Sumit made a decision without telling her, it chipped away at her self-worth. Every time he cracked a joke about her looks or age, the camera caught the hurt she tried to hide behind forced laughter. Decisions about money or family weren't everyday choices. They were reminders that her opinion didn't count, even though she'd uprooted her life for him. Sumit, on the other hand, told his story as one of walking on eggshells, afraid that any step could set off a storm. In his mind, Jenny's frustration was unpredictable. The drinking was his way out. The secrets were about survival, not deception. He painted her as controlling, but was she, or did she just need to know something in her life is stable and not changing at the whims of someone else? Each accusation felt like a plea for understanding. You don't listen. You ignore what I need. You don't respect me enough to let me know if our savings disappear. Of course, frustration grows wild when someone you love keeps you outside the door. Everything came to a head in therapy. Voices cracked, tempers flared. But then Jenny found her words. She admitted the anger. She admitted the tension. She said, clear and steady, that her frustration is a wall built from being left out over and over again. Nobody listened to what she wanted, she explained, and so anger became her only weapon to be seen at all. That confession turned the room quiet, even taking the edge off Sumit's defenses for a second. People watching might have caught a glimpse of the truth lurking underneath the spectacle. This was someone afraid she might go through her last days unheard, unknown, erased by years of sacrifice that nobody recognized. Sumit sat across, still not ready to give an inch, talking about being scared, about not wanting to trigger another explosion. By keeping secrets, maybe he thought he was protecting peace. But peace built on hiding always collapses. Who is responsible when a couple's entire life gets aired in front of millions? The debate twisted another notch with every new leaked detail, every fan responding to Jenny's posts, every clip rewatched for some sign of hidden malice or a moment when someone's patience cracked. In my opinion, this mess is what happens when communication goes so wrong nobody is sure what the original fight was even about. The hardest truth is that in this relationship, neither is being fully heard. Jenny's pain gets louder when ignored. Sumit's fear grows every time he fails to talk honestly about what no one dared ask the final question out loud. Would either of them still choose this life if fear and loneliness weren't bigger than the love that started it all? The answer seemed closer than ever to exploding, yet the air in the room stayed thick with everything neither dared to say. The real test, the one that decides if healing is possible, was still waiting ahead. And everyone watching could sense that the moment to decide was nearly here. Banquet day arrived with a mix of dread and forced optimism, the kind that turns every casual smile into a test. Jenny sat in front of the salon mirror, letting a thick layer of foundation and glittery eyeshadow transform the exhaustion in her eyes into something closer to hope. It wasn't just makeup, it was an armor she hadn't worn in months. The stylist made polite small talk, but Jenny's laugh came tight and delayed, as though she could barely remember how to relax in front of strangers. Each brushstroke was less about beauty and more about trying to reclaim some version of herself that got lost somewhere between airports, hospital bills, and stoic nights in a tiny bedroom down the hall from people who never wanted her there in the first place. Even if only for a night, she wanted to feel seen again. Sumit hovered nearby, a bundle of nerves who tried to mask it with compliments about how pretty she looked. He kept reminding her, sometimes sweetly, sometimes awkwardly, that she was different tonight. Jenny smiled the way you do when you want to believe something just because someone tells you, but it was hard not to notice that hopeful flicker in her eyes when he repeated himself. As other couples prepared for the dinner, Jenny tried to absorb a shred of normalcy. But nothing about this night felt normal. The closer the banquet came, the more every outfit choice, every word, every glance seemed loaded with meaning. The therapist's voice took on a game show quality, asking each husband to compliment his partner's efforts. When Jenny's turn arrived, Sumit's words stumbled and fell flat. He mentioned how Jenny always looks good, but not in the way someone says when they mean it. More like a line rehearsed for cameras, maybe even for his parents in the back of his mind. He nudged in a comparison to Indian style and let his disappointment show, as if her age or difference were barriers to real praise. A hush fell over the table, therapist and castmates exchanging glances. Jenny braced herself. Public compliments sting most when you know they're half-hearted or backhanded. Still, she kept her chin high. Inside, though, the swirl of anger and sadness was building again. After months of feeling like an outsider, here was the closest thing she'd had to a spotlight in ages, and even that felt borrowed, temporary, surrounded by the awkwardness of everyone's relief that at least she hadn't erupted this time. The night wore on, with dinner passing in a blur, forks clicking, awkward toasts, silent contests of who could act the most normal. But beneath the surface, nobody forgot the storm from earlier. Sumit fumbled another attempt at humor, pointing his fork too close to Jenny's face, earning him a sharp reminder from the therapist. The room cracked up on cue, but you could see Jenny's patience thinning again. Years of being the butt of jokes, always with the promise that tomorrow things would be better, had left her tired. After the laughter faded, there was only the sound of knives scraping plates and hearts beating fast with what was left unsaid. Later, in the quiet of their room, Jenny admitted to herself she had lost track of when she last felt important. She wasn't angry for show anymore. The anger came from the grief of seeing herself disappear, one decision at a time. Sumit, for a moment, let his guard down, laying out regret and the tiniest hope someone might forgive him. There was a vulnerable honesty in the way he looked at her then, softening for the first time since the investment was outed. But even an apology, neither seemed sure what future was left to apologize for. They talked about making up after fights, the rush of reconnection, the cycle repeating until they were dizzy with relief and exhaustion. The next morning, the hangover from the night before lingered in the air. Jenny dressed slowly, applying the lessons she'd learned, that loving someone isn't the same as being loved back on your terms. Sumit watched her, apologetic but unreadable. They spoke about building again, about moving forward, but each promise felt slightly emptier with every repeat. It's a hard truth. Sometimes people hold on because the alternative is emptier still. Was either of them staying for love or clinging to a story that helped both forget their loneliness? As the cameras captured one last shot, questions kept spinning. Will Sumit ever regret the secrets enough to finally be honest? Or is honesty too risky in a house built on compromise? Will Jenny stop measuring her worth by how much she's needed and start demanding more? Can either of them let go of the battles long enough to build something new? Or are they locked in this endless loop of drama because it's become the only normal they know? The episode stopped just shy of a true ending, leaving the door wide open for the next crisis hiding in the wings, the silent question left hanging over that blurred dinner table. There are wounds in this marriage that haven't bled out yet, secrets that feel close to the surface, but too dangerous to name. After confessions, tears, and the crash of emotional storms, maybe the greatest cliffhanger isn't the next blow-up, but whether either of them will ever feel truly chosen, wanted, or safe again. And as the credits rolled, everyone watching knew there was still one secret left, something neither had admitted, something that could turn the next episode inside out. If you think this was dramatic, don't blink, because when the truth finally lands, it might upend what you thought you knew about both of them.